Greetings, greetings, greetings. Happy Monday. I am Nicole Everett, the host of Conversations with Nicole, where we are connecting the community through conversations. It is November 1st, 2021, and it's what I call Man Up Monday. It's been a while since I've had a Man Up Monday. Actually, a little bit over a year because I think October 2020 was the last time I did it. But I had to bring it back because there are so many conversations to be had. So I am so excited to be here with you, and we have a great guest and great topics of discussion tonight. But before we get started, y'all know how I do. I need to know where you're from. So in the comments, put your city and your state, and I definitely want to give you a shout out. I see you, Javon, and she is in Atlanta. Greetings, my sister. Hope you're doing well. Hope everybody's doing well. I've missed y'all. I've had some special live broadcasts, but I'm getting back on schedule. I'm not gonna have y'all up at 10 o'clock at night like I did before. I'm gonna try to bring that back so we're not on so late. But 8:30, I'm gonna try to be here on Mondays and Wednesdays. So you all please be here, tune in and enjoy the conversation. That's what this is all about. Greetings, Anthony DeMarco in Tallahassee. Hey there, Russell and Quincy. So the Big Bend area is representing. Terrell, the chief, is present and accounted for, and he's right here in Tallahassee as well. So I appreciate this, my Tallahassee folks representing. So I met this brother actually on Instagram, and I can't figure out if it was the end of last year or the beginning of this year. We actually were talking about that before going live, but uh, so, the beauty of technology right now is you can meet people and connect worldwide, right? So, for those of you who may know, Professor Latanya White, actually, she's now Dr. White. She was doing these live broadcasts where she would do an assessment of your business. And so this brother was getting his assessment done, and I was just really kind of intrigued by what he was doing. So I started following him, and he had these posts that were real motivational and whatnot. So reached out to him, talked to him about being on the show, and this was actually back, I think, in April sometime. But things got busy, and it just didn't happen. So reached back out because he has a book out now called Own Your Kingdom. And I thought, man, that would be perfect to talk about for Man Up Monday. So reached out. He was like, yeah, I'd love to be on. So let me introduce this brother. He is actually out of Texas. Mr. Javon Wooten is an Army veteran, certified mindset and perception coach, author, speaker, and founder of Live Not Loathe LLC. He has overcome adversity, depression, and PTSD to earn multiple certifications recognized throughout the coaching community, as well as an MBA from the University of Maryland Robert H. Smith Business School and an MS in cybersecurity from Fordham University. His mission is to empower others to increase their self confidence, improve their perception of their worth, and design their lives through a mindset shift from scarcity to abundance. I love all of that. So, without further ado, help me welcome Mr. Javon Wooten.
Hey, pleasure to be here. I'm honored to be here, Nicole. Thank you for the introduction. That was awesome, and thank you for everyone who's on right now with us. This is going to be an exciting show.
Yes, yes, yes. So more folks are chiming in, so I appreciate that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey, Maine, tuning in from Monticello. I appreciate it. So tell the folks a little. I mean, I just read a little bio about it, but tell them who you are. Who is Javon? Not what you do, but who is Javon?
Right, and I love that question. Well, first and foremost, I would say Javon is compassionate. Right, all this whole journey started from that singular word, compassion. I was always told, as a youth, that I had a gift with, motivating people, getting people up, and getting people excited to do things. But I didn't want to be a speaker. I didn't think that that was my purpose. I didn't want to be on the stage traveling all the time. So while I was deployed in Afghanistan in 2017, I found coaching. And that was perfect for me because I really, when it's all said and done, I want my legacy to be that I've helped thousands of people. And that's who I am in a nutshell. I'm just all about helping others, especially the Black community. I'm all about giving my time to helping others own their time.
All right. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. So, talk about the business. Live Not Loathe. Tell me what prompted you one to do the business, and then that name. Tell me about the name.
Okay, cool. So one, what prompted me to do the business was I struggled myself. I struggled with depression, anxiety, PTSD, you name it. I struggled with having limiting beliefs. That self-doubt was crushing me. It actually got me in some trouble when I was younger. When I was 17, I got arrested and faced 7 to 10 years in prison. And that was really my turning point. That's when I asked God, like, please give me another chance, right? And He did. By the grace of God, I got out and I was able to graduate high school, and I became the man you see here today, just because I learned from that. I learned that I never wanted to see the pain that it caused my mom and my sisters. I learned that there was another way outside of trying to get fast cash. I learned that my mind and my drive and my heart were really my secret weapons. My superpower was actually that I cared so much that I was willing to do whatever it took to provide for my family.
Mm.
But I had to turn that into a positive, right? So that positive is live not loathe. And the reason why I named it Live Not Loathe is because I see so many people going day in and day out, really dreading life. They're loathing, right? Every day they wake up like, damn, I don't want to go to this job. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. So I want to cause that paradigm shift for people. I want people to live, really, truly enjoy life, have a fulfilling life, have a purposeful life. So that's why I named it Live Not Loathe.
All right. That, hey, makes sense to me. You're right. A lot of people are going through life loathing
For
going to
sure.
work or whatever it is they have to do. Heck, adulting sometimes,
Adulting, yes. Yeah, I
Like,
mean, I myself, like even being a mindset and perception coach, I have to make sure I make that shift for myself every day. Instead of
mhm,
saying I don't want to do this, I say I get to do these things because these are blessings that we have. We,
mm,
so many people wish they were in our shoes. So I always say, like, I want to make sure I'm grateful. Like I show that gratitude to myself first, but also to God for giving me, these positions and putting me here. That could
okay.
have went it could have went left real fast for me. So,
Yes,
you know, so I'm by the grace of God, I'm here.
look, facts. It could have went left. So, I hear a lot of people talk about gratitude, and so,
Hmm.
I think that is also a very important concept and mindset to have.
For
So,
sure.
mindset coach, that's a little different. That's a little different. So, I know that everything starts in the mind, right?
For sure. For sure.
Before we act, we have to think the thought.
Yes. Yes. And also not just thinking, a lot of our actions are based on emotions,
Mm,
right? So I always say that, like when I talk to my clients, I tell them we need to put an interrupt between the thought and the emotion, between that and the action, right? Because if you act out of emotion, you're not acting intelligently. It's really a response versus thinking about it and then carrying out what you need to carry out. And that's a big difference because if you act out of emotion or impulse, now you might regret saying what you didn't mean to say in that argument. You may do something that cost you your life, as I did, that I almost threw 7 to 10 years of my life about. But
mhm,
so that's why it's so important. And that's why I wanted to focus on the mindset because I myself had to go through and cause my own shifts. So I know exactly what it takes, right, to push the right buttons to be able to say, all right, let me take this 5 second breath so I can respond intelligently. Or let me go ahead and realize like what my strengths are so I'm not focusing on my weaknesses and bashing myself because things aren't going the way I want them to. And also realizing that we only can control what we do, right? We don't control outcomes. And a lot of us get in trouble because we wish we did control those outcomes, but we
mm.
control our effort, right? We control our effort and our responses. So that's very important for people to recognize.
Okay. Yeah, totally agree. We sometimes get caught up in other people's actions and words, and we can only focus on ourselves. We can only control
Right,
ourselves. So,
right.
and we can't allow their words and actions to have so much power over us.
For sure, for sure,
Mhm.
and that's you saying a word, Nicole, because a lot of people say you make me mad or you make me do this. They're not making you do that, right? You
Mhm.
still have the option. There was a study, and they were talking about the study. Pretty much was like seeing how people react and what happens in their mind when someone gets upset or whatever, and they realized that really, if you don't respond physically, you will not feel upset because the
Mhm.
act of getting upset causes your muscles to tense up. You may feel your
Mhm.
jaw tighten, you get hotter. It causes a physical response. So if
Mhm.
you do not allow yourself to clench or do any of that, right, you have the conscious decision to just pause, take that breath, and really just calm yourself before you react to anything. And that's the real key for people to know. Like when you get upset, you got to identify like what's happening, right? Identify your physiological responses, and I guarantee you it'll make that difference the next time you start feeling upset. Now, of course, it's natural for us to get upset. It's anger is actually a good thing, right? But you have how you utilize that anger and how you convey that anger or that emotion, whatever that is the difference maker.
Love it. Yes. So we got a couple comments coming in. Anthony said, "Today is my mentor's birthday. He's been missing since 2017, but he always told me cultivate that space between thought and action. This, this like true gift right now." Yeah. So you gotta, sometimes you gotta give yourself a pause because sometimes
For
you
sure.
can get emotional.
Yeah.
And it gets you going, maybe doing some things you probably in your, I'll just say, your right mind, or a more sober mind, wouldn't do. So you
Hmm.
definitely want to be careful of that. Javon, the female Javon, she said, "I tried to wait 24 hours before responding. I found a lot of times I no longer care, but was furious before the 24 hours."
Yeah, and these are good.
Mhm.
Waiting and making sure you can respond correctly and intelligently is very important. And also knowing like if you're responding to your spouse or something, knowing the type of communicator the other person is really helps, right? Because some
Mhm.
people want to address issues right then and there. Some people actually need that time to process so they don't lash out or say something they need. So I always recommend, like, if you're in a relationship or something, to really identify your communication styles. I actually have people take an Enneagram test when they come on board, right? My
Okay.
program. I have them take the Enneagram because it shows like a lot about you. Like your type really identifies. Are you a people pleaser? Are you a giver? Are you a taker?
Mhm.
Are you a communicator? Are you a alpha personality, a beta? All that stuff really matters, and it helps your relationships when you identify that. Because if you try to force someone to communicate who needs that space, they're
Mhm.
probably going to say something they don't want to say. So it's really beneficial for most people really to take that time, even if it's just 5 minutes, to go off and calm down. Right? You
Mhm.
don't want to take too long often because if you take too long, you start overthinking. And now
Mhm.
you start making these what if scenarios and you start creating something that's really not there. So you have to really be careful of that. So
Okay.
I really recommend people find out, really pay attention to that. Do a self assessment. What type of communicator am I? When I'm upset, do I say things that I typically don't say? Do I
Mm.
bring old things up? And that's another thing. When you bring old things up that were already addressed, right? Are you doing that? Are you trying to cut? Are you just saying things to cut so you can hurt them how you feel like they're
Mhm.
hurting you? So all these things are mindset, and in mindset, emotions tie hand to hand. So you really want to make sure that you're doing what's necessary. You got to do the work because when it comes, you want to have trained yourself to be able to respond correctly.
All right, boy, that's a whole nother show right there. But
Yeah, yeah.
uh, Princess says she
There
practices a
you
lot of
go.
mindfulness exercises. Latanya said never respond when emotional, stepping back, and woo-saw as
Woosah,
needed.
yes.
Yes.
Yes,
And then
yes.
Johnny Johnson, my inquisitor friend Johnny wants to know, where do you find that test?
The Enneagram test. Hey, if anyone's interested, I can send it out after this.
Okay.
Just reach out to me. They can shoot me a DM or something, and I can share it with them
Okay. Wonderful. So
for
let's
sure.
dive in. Let's dive in. So it's Man Up Monday, and we decided to tackle the topic of vulnerability.
Yes,
So can a man that's manning up be vulnerable?
a man that's manning up is vulnerable. I would venture to say, right?
Okay.
Vulnerability is strength. A lot of us have been taught the opposite, which is false. And I'll tell you why. Vulnerability opens you up to things that you would never have reached. I call it serendipity, right? Vulnerability allows you to connect with people you wouldn't connect with if you weren't open. It allows you to make experiences that you would not otherwise have. Because when you're in that shell, that defensive shell, and you don't allow people and things to get in, that's blocking blessings, right? And some of the ways that we become vulnerable that we don't know are vulnerable moments, childbirth is a vulnerable, that's as vulnerable as you can get, right? You don't know
Mhm.
what the outcome is going to be. You don't know if the baby's going to be healthy. You don't know if the baby's going to survive or the mother's going to survive, right? But what happens, we don't think about those things, but when that life comes, it's beautiful, right? And that's the same thing for everything else in life, right? To achieve love, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to step out there and put yourself in a place of discomfort in order to grow. So that's
Mhm.
what vulnerability allows. It allows you to grow in all facets of life, right? Mentally, right? When you understand, like, hey, I'm not good at something, right? You're
Mhm.
vulnerable enough to collaborate. You're vulnerable enough to hear ideas from other people's and other perspectives. So there's so many ways that vulnerability helps.
Mm. Excellent points. Yeah, I think we need to dispel some of the myths around a man being vulnerable. You
Hmm.
know, I think in our society here in America, men are supposed to be brave. They aren't supposed to show emotion. They're supposed to be strong, and strength is not vulnerable. Um,
Right, right.
Anthony said that strength is being open.
Yes, exactly. It is. And I look at it like this, Nicole. You cannot truly be authentic if you are not vulnerable,
Mhm.
right? Because what you're doing is protecting, you're guarding against people getting in. So even if you want them in, you're gonna do things, you're gonna be pushing them away, you're gonna be just causing this discord, right? Just because you're trying to protect yourself. And
Mhm.
that's a huge issue, right? Therapy is now becoming more prevalent in the communities because people are seeing like their icons or their stars and their stuff talk about it, right? They're being vulnerable. And what is that doing? That's opening up more people, right? And
Mhm.
that's why earlier I said compassion is really what sums me up, because that's compassion, right? That's spreading, you have a platform. Why not utilize it to be transparent and let people know it's okay to be vulnerable?
Mhm.
We can't truly heal if we don't admit that there's something wrong, there's something going on. You cannot, and you're never going to achieve your highest point. You're never going to reach that pinnacle in your life because you have anchors, right? You're holding on to things that really do not serve you.
Mm. Great point again. Javon said, I call those emotionally unavailable.
Yeah. Well, it manifests itself in different ways, right?
Hmm.
Some people, when you talk about being vulnerable, right, that it manifests in different ways. So depending on the personality, again. So some people, when they're trying to hold on, they may actually do the opposite, right? They may have attachment issues where when they're holding on that person, right, their vulnerability is actually with themselves. So instead of putting the onus of happiness on them, they put it on other people to say, hey, you're supposed to make me happy, right? If you're not doing that, then I'm sad, I'm not feeling good, right? So they attach it to other people because they don't want to have to deal with what really is going on within themselves. So they're not vulnerable with themselves. So that really plays a factor in if they're emotionally unavailable and functional, or if it's the opposite. So there's different ways that vulnerability comes into play. It's not necessarily always with other people. Sometimes it's with yourself.
Javon typed in exactly what I was thinking, which was interesting. You said
Hmm.
emotionally unavailable but functional. Wow,
Yes,
I had
yes,
not
they can
thought
be
about that,
functional.
but there are probably a number of people walking around like that.
Yeah. Oh, for sure, for sure. And when I talked about, you hear people talk about representatives, right? So
Mm-hmm.
someone may be happy, they're smiling, they're communicating with everyone, they're looking like an extrovert, right? They're doing all those things, but they're deep down when they're behind those closed doors, they're none of that. That's not them, right? So we really have to be conscious about that. You know, what people are portraying and conveying may not necessarily be what they're feeling inside, right?
Mm.
So that's what I mean by that vulnerability, right? They seem like they're open, they seem like they're really enjoying life and living it up, but deep down inside they're really just hiding from themselves. So they want to be in these crowds, but they're really alone, right, internally, right? So
Wow.
that's that example that I was trying to give.
Wow. Wow. Princess said, facing your fears to trust without being confined to oneself.
Mm,
Mm.
mm, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and the biggest, the sometimes the hardest person to trust is yourself, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah. So Princess asked, so what do you do?
So I'll put it simply. I help people design a life they don't need a vacation from. And what I mean by that is they increase their confidence, they build their self-esteem, and they change their perception of self first, and then of their out. I mean their outside world and their situation, their circumstances. So how I do that is there's a lot to it, but I'll try to sum it up quickly. How
Mm-hmm.
I do that is I identify, what they haven't forgiven themselves from for. I identify, their triggers and how they typically respond. And then I give them an action plan to go ahead and move past their mistakes and move into a more confident, more sure uh, version of themselves without those limiting beliefs and self doubts holding on to. So we replace their negative anchors with positive anchors. And what that is so your negative anchor may be one of those beliefs that you were holding on to, or it could be a person that's in your life that you shouldn't be having in your life because they're just draining you, they're taking away from you, right? And we place that with positives to say, all right, I'm gonna reframe the way I'm saying things. Like I was talking about, instead of I have to, you say I get to, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
one. But also finding positive support systems, right? Whether that's a group, whether that's a person, whatever it is. And you also want to make sure you're reinforcing it so the success is lasting. So I do accountability check-ins. We have
Mm-hmm.
group discussions. We have a lot, right? We do a ton of different things to make sure that this is not just something where you need me your whole life. I don't want that. I want you to do the program and then you can move forward and you have all the tools where you can just move forward and be strong. So if you do feel yourself regressing, I could say, hold on, in Javon's program, or when I talked to him, he gave me these certain tools and resources. So let me go ahead and implement that. So
Okay.
everyone is different. So, we have to do those assessments to see where you're at in life and what you're trying to get to.
All right. Very good. Thanks for sharing that. So
Mhm.
Johnny, again, my inquisitive friend, Johnny got all the questions. He wants to know, do you have a lot of clients?
Well, a lot is relative. What I
Yeah.
do is I try not to take on more than like 10 clients at a time, right? Within my group. So it's kind of like a cohort style program for my group coaching. And then one-on-one, I really only one-on-one coach about 3 people a year. So that's how I typically like to do. Because when I serve people, I want to serve them with a full cup. I don't want to be just having people like it's just a mill pushing people through. I want to
Mm.
really make sure people are getting transformations. I want to be available to those people who have trusted me to get that transformation for them.
Okay. And then Princess wants to know, do you work with kids or youth?
I do actually. I do. Actually, I do that a lot. I typically partner with nonprofits to do that, or schools. I'm trying to get more into schools now. That's one of my things for this next year is to try to connect with some schools and
Okay.
just go there and speak to the youth. And also, I work with like prison too. So
Okay.
some people, if they come out, people who've done like 20 plus years, I try to find them and then just like give them like free coaching so they can try to get reintegrated into society, because that's one of the biggest mindset shifts you can ever have, right?
Mm. So along the lines of vulnerability, I think a lot of times people, when they feel themselves being vulnerable, there's a sense of losing control, and people
Mm,
want to be in control. They don't want anybody to see them cry, or don't want to exhibit fear, or things of that nature. If you were coaching someone, what would your advice be in terms of being vulnerable, but um, not being fearful of losing control?
Right. Well, one, I would ask them to define control for me. Right. What does control look like to them?
Mhm.
Right? Because that this definition of control will really dictate what their issue is with vulnerability, right? Because some people have a misinterpretation, and I always tell people vulnerability is not being naive, right? It's not like you're going telling your life story to someone your absolute worst adversary or something like that, right? Vulnerability is really identifying that support system, someone you feel comfortable with sharing things with. That's great, right? You want to start small, right? I didn't just come on IG and Facebook just sharing all these things just out of nowhere. Like I started small, right? First thing I had to do was be vulnerable enough to tell myself, like, you need to get help, right? And you go talk to a therapist, get that professional help. I hired my own coach, someone who's familiar with these types of things. That's the one thing I tell people to do from the jump. And then you want to get that support system, right? Whether it's a family friend or a family member, whoever it is, you want to bring them into the fold and say, hey, I wanted to let you know I haven't been feeling well. And these are the things that's been going on. If I can call you, right? If when I'm feeling this way, whatever it is, you want to set that precedence, and then you want to also set boundaries, right?
Mm,
Set your boundaries. Let them know, like when if you just want a shoulder to cry on and you don't want them to say anything, cool, right? That's what you need. Or you can say, hey, I would love your feedback, whatever it is. And let them know like what it looks like when you're just not feeling well. Now, of course, you have to be fair to them. You can't always use, hey, I'm not feeling well as a reason to not do stuff.
mm-hmm.
If that's the case, that professional help is really, really necessary for you. But if it's a time where you're supposed to go somewhere, you just don't feel it, realize it's okay to say, hey, I don't feel like doing it.
Okay.
And a lot of us feel like we need to make an excuse. You don't need excuses. We are all adults. Say, hey, I just don't feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's good enough, right? You just have to be willing to open up and share with people everything. Like I'm talking about the boundaries, how you're feeling, all that comes in a package. It's not like you're just spraying to everyone and you're crying in a room full of people you don't even know. Right? You just
Mm-hmm.
want to make sure you're doing it intelligently, and that's going to be my word that I use constantly because I really want people to understand that you're conscious of these things, right? You're really conscious of what you're doing and who you're being vulnerable with, and you want to make sure you're not creating mountains out of molehills with some things too. You want to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that when you're talking about vulnerability, you're not making things up. Like this person right here, I feel like they're going to use this right years later in an argument, or they're going to share this like for me, if I start getting known or whatever, I might say, oh, if I share this with Nicole, is she gonna come back and tell the media that this like you got to make sure you're not making these things up, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's really why people fear it. People fear that people are going to go behind their backs and really harm them. But I mean, if you're true vulnerability, people probably already know your story anyway, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
me, I'm very transparent about my story. So you just have to go be comfortable with what you're doing. Don't go for everything at once. Start small. Just get a building block foundation of vulnerability.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that is something that you often hear people talking about, in terms of they don't want anybody knowing their business. So they're
Mm-hmm.
going to, some things that they did, these skeletons are going to come back to haunt them and
Right.
things of that nature. So, you're not being naive and you're not sharing necessarily with everybody.
Everyone. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Right.
all things to think about. So just trying to, you know, undo some of that programming that we have, changing that
Right.
mindset, changing that
Yep.
mindset.
Changing that mindset. You always want to, with everything, you start a little bit where you're comfortable, right? You start where you're comfortable a little bit, start getting that, and then you step a little past that comfort zone a little bit more, right? And that's what you do. And then
Yeah.
that becomes your new baseline. Then once that's your new baseline, you go a little further. And that's how you do. It's really not, you don't got to go all in at all at once, right? Because you have to understand, right? You have to understand it first, what that means for you. And then
Mm-hmm.
understand what your fears are with it, and I recommend people actually write down what's going on right in their mindset and track this. right? That's why journaling is so important. So you can track everything that you're feeling at that moment. Why? What happened? What was the outcome? What was your response? What did you really feel inside if your response was different from that? All those things are some things that you want to track and write down.
Okay. No, I think that's a great idea. I'm all for writing it down because in the moment or in the midst of, you can get it out and then go back and reflect upon it as well.
For sure, for sure.
Okay. So I think when you asked about the definition of vulnerability, Princess was saying not losing my independence. Not
And I would ask Princess to define independence for me. What is independence? Because that can mean a lot of things, right? Independence as far as like freedom of doing things she wants to do, independence of thinking. What does it mean? Independence is being single, like not wanting to be, in committed relationships. What does independence look like for her? So that those are things, because you always, as a coach, you don't want to assume, right? Assumptions are out the window. I don't assume that your definitions are the same as mine, because we are two totally unique people. So I always want to ask and make the person really look in this and assess, because words are easy to say, but they're really hard to define at times, right?
Yes.
So we really have to take that into account.
Agreed. So she did respond. She said, freedom of my identity. Freedom of my identity.
So we'll keep doing this, right?
Yes.
So she says freedom of her identity. So I'll ask, what is her identity?
Yes.
Right? Because that ties into, aligns with values. Who does she want to be? So we would keep doing that dance.
Right.
And that drill down is very important, because when you drill down, not only am I getting an understanding, but this also causes the client to have to really get crystal clear about what they want. Right? It's kind of like, a doctor. When a doctor comes in, if they don't know exactly what's wrong, they ask you these questions, right? That's the same thing. In order to prescribe the action plan, I can't just look at you and say, oh, this is what you need, right? Here's your thing. No, we really have to take time, and sometimes this takes a couple of sessions to get to it, because an hour trying to dissect your life in an hour is really hard, right? But that's where that accountability, and that's where the work outside of the sessions really come into play. Because when you work with me, I'm not just sitting there for that hour with you. I'm checking in with you, right? I'm asking, like, hey, did you do that what we said you needed to do? Hey, did you call that person that you were afraid to call, that you really wanted to reestablish the relationship with? Whatever it is, we create that. We come away with some steps that you need to do before our next session, and I'm going to be on you about it. Because that's the only way people really are going to change, because it's not going to be me that really I help the change, I assist the change, but the person has to be willing to make the change. They have to be willing to do the work. And a lot of people think they're ready, and they find out that it's a lot harder than it seems. Right?
So she did respond, and I'm only this is the last one I'm gonna put up, but she said,
Okay.
phenomenal woman of worth. So what I'm going to say here is, and I think Jevon was kind of alluding to this as well, or said it too, is that words make a difference. And while we use these words and we have our thoughts about what they mean, they don't necessarily mean the same thing to the person that we are saying those words to. So we need to be real clear on what the words mean when we're saying them, and make sure that the person we're saying them to, has the same understanding, or at least understands where we're coming from.
Right. Well,
when you talk about words like independence, freedom, identity, those are some they are some big concepts, and we just need to be clear on that.
Right. So for Princess, I would recommend she takes that, what she, a phenomenal woman of worth, and break down what that is. Like, really break down what that looks like. Right? I'm talking about write it, and keep that, so she can say, hey, worth to me is whatever that is, right? And really break it down into layman's terms, as deep as possible. Right. And then that's when and she can go ahead and hit me up. We can schedule a session if she'd like. We could talk about that, right? What that means.
All right, good deal. All right, so Johnny wants to know what not loads mean. Johnny, we already talked about it at the beginning. So in the interest of time, I'm gonna ask you to check it out in the replay, okay? Because I want to move on to perception. But before we move on to perception, you've mentioned coaching and you've
Hmm.
mentioned counseling. So I want you to just briefly talk about the difference between coaching and counseling.
Sure. So coaching focuses on where you are and where you're trying to get to, right? We don't worry so much about the past, right? We only go there if it's really hindering you from getting away from where you are now, right? Whereas counseling focuses on like a psychological or personal issue that really caused from trauma or something in the past, and you're really hindering on that one specific issue, right? So to me, that's really what the difference is between coaching and counseling.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, coaches, we're not really going to, work do trauma work. We're not therapists. We're not, licensed to do things like that, right? We
Mm,
may help you get past the trauma, right? Like as far as moving past the mistakes, so you can go, but we're not going to dive in and diagnose you and do all the other stuff.
okay. Thank you for sharing that because I just
Yeah,
want
no pleasure.
folks to understand that there is a difference,
Oh, a
and
big difference for
and
sure.
sometimes counseling and therapy is what's needed, and that's perfectly
Hmm.
fine. So
For sure.
yeah. Do you ever or need a counseling or therapy?
I have
Uh-oh.
actually. I have. You okay?
You have?
I
Okay.
got you.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I
we had
have.
a little blip.
Oh yeah, I was wondering. I was like, what is the? But I guess
Yeah.
the luckily it came back to Wi-Fi. But yes, I have actually to a couple of clients
Okay.
because a lot of times, there goes that vulnerability again. A lot of
Mhm.
times people don't want to admit that there's a mental health issue there, right?
Yeah.
Or they just don't know, right? They're like, man,
Mhm.
I don't know why I just get upset and I spaz out for no reason, right? They just don't understand because these are relatively new concepts to a lot of us, right? The whole concept of depression, anxiety, PTSD, bipolar. So all this stuff is like relatively new. Really, just I always tell people like, if you don't know, get the help. Go to a therapist anyway. I tell everyone at least go a couple sessions with a therapist, whether you think you have an issue or not, right? Because you'll be surprised what is uncovered in those sessions, right? When you're honest, when you're actually vulnerable and honest with that person and yourself.
All right. Very good. So let's move on to mindset. We've been talking about it, kind of skirting around it, but I'm sorry, perception,
Hmm.
which mindset, of course, is a huge part of perception, right?
For sure, for
All
sure.
right.
Yeah.
So tell us Javon's definition of perception.
So perception, to put it simply, is the way you see things, right? Whether that's yourself, your circumstances, the world, that's perception. It's just how you see it, right? And a lot of us struggle with perception of self. We see ourselves as less than or undeserving of something. So when I say mindset and perception coach, I separated that intentionally, right? Because you can have an abundant mindset you could want for yourself, but if you have the perception that you don't deserve or you're not powerful enough to get it, then a lot of people just won't go for it, right? They dream, they'll talk about it, whatever, but they will not take action because they're afraid, right? They're afraid that they will fail, and that's another thing you perceive. A lot of people perceive failure as a bad thing when it's not. Success is a failure is actually a part of success, right?
Hmm.
I have yet to see, a person go for something that's out of their comfort zone and get it on the first try. Is very rare, right? And even greats fail. Like we see people fail all the time, right? We're like LeBron James has lost many, championships. That's considered a failure for him, but in the journey, right, he learned so much that he could apply to that next year, and then he wins, right? So it's really how you perceive everything. There's really no good only or bad only. Everything has good and bad. There's give and take for
Mhm.
everything. So no
Mhm.
matter what it is, but it's up to you to see that good, right? Out of whatever the bad situation is, out of the adversity. So that's why we really do a lot of work on that perception.
All right. So there's a common saying that perception is reality,
Mm-hmm.
right? Perception is
Mm-hmm.
reality. But sometimes that reality is not based on truth, it's not based on facts. It's again based on, as you said, how we see things.
Right.
How do we combat that?
Right. So that is something that you really have to do a lot of work on, because if I always say your perception is your reality, right? So what one thing I always tell people to do is stop the negative self-talk, right? If you're constantly bashing yourself in your mind, then you're not going to go far, right? You're not going to go anywhere, because you don't believe that you can do that. So stop the negative self-talk. Two, you want to identify your strengths, right? Write down what you're good at and what that could lead to, right? Instead of focusing on the negatives, instead of saying, "Oh, I'm weak in this, I need to work on this." Identify what you're good at first. Start working on that and start strengthening those and utilizing those in the things that you're doing, right, to get you where you're trying to go. Number three is identify resources that would help you start seeing yourself, whether that's groups, whether that's coaching, whether that's therapy, whatever it is. Identify those resources and go ahead and put yourself out there. And then four, you want to really, really challenge yourself. And it sounds counterintuitive to challenge yourself. And what if you fail, right? But if we look back, I always tell people to look back at a time that you were afraid that you actually succeeded, and lean on that, right? Lean on that to see that, even if you did fail, you're still here, right? You're still here.
Mhm.
You didn't, so you always hear the thing like it's a joke when they say, "But did you die?" But it's true, right? When you fail, how bad were the consequences? Right?
Mm,
Chances are you learned something actually from it. It made you a
mm,
little better, right? Whatever that failure was. We really catastrophize a lot of things in our mind, and we say, "Man, if I don't get this job right, I'm screwed," or whatever the case may be. But it's typically not as bad as we make it out to be, right? We're making it grand. That's that
mm,
mountain out of molehill perception again. So really challenge yourself. Just do a small thing first, right? Something small, like if you wanted to, for instance, you knew there was a job on LinkedIn, you want to reach out to that recruiter. Go ahead and try that, right? That's simple. You can reach out. If the person doesn't respond, no harm, no foul. But if they do respond and set up the interview, now you're good, right? So see the positive outcomes, see what's possible on the positive side, and don't worry so much about the negatives, right? Again, you can't control the outcomes. All you can control is your effort and what you're doing to get to where you're trying to go. So you really have to realize that. And then also you want to go ahead and make sure you have that support system as well. Someone
mm,
you can say, "Hey, I really want to do this, but I'm afraid, right? I'm scared to do it." Maybe they'll do it with you if it's something like that. But you just have to start challenging yourself to see your powers, see what you're capable of, and that's really the bottom line. And stop telling yourself you can't. Right. You hear that all the time, like the word can't shouldn't be in your vocabulary. I'm not going to say that, but what I will say is you should at least try and not make excuses on why you're not doing it, because excuses, we always say in the military, the maximum effective range of excuse is zero. Excuse
mm,
does nothing for you but add fear, and fear, what it should be used for is to propel you, right? Fear it's a primal instinct, right, to keep you alive. Well,
mhm,
I venture to say, like, if you're fearing something and you know it's good for you, that's probably telling you should go for it. So you live a life that you really want to live, right? You're afraid
mm,
of it because it's unfamiliar, but that's what you need to be doing, right? If you get that little shake and you start feeling those little butterflies, before the job interview, that's a good thing, right? Turn
mhm,
that feeling, instead of saying you're nervous, say you're excited, right? Because
mm,
how you speak, how you talk to yourself really makes a difference. Those little
mhm.
language shifts really make a difference in how you handle certain things.
Nice. All right. So I took a few notes. You said write down what you're good at.
Write down your strengths. Write down what you're good
Write
at.
down your strengths. Okay. Stop
hmm
negative self-talk.
Stop negative self-talk. Switch it to
Okay.
positive.
Right.
Instead of saying I don't have or I'm not this, say how can I get, right? How can I
Mm-hmm.
get this? Because it's all
Okay.
possible, right? People, we
Indeed.
have to stop looking at success as a finite resource, right? We
Mm-hmm.
can have success in perpetuity. It's really up to you. right? And one, you have to
Mhm.
define what success is to you, and
Right.
then you can start really making that plan to get to it.
Okay. Identify resources.
Identify resources.
Challenge yourself.
Yep.
See the
Challenge
positive
yourself.
side. Okay.
hmm
And then have a support system.
Have a support system for
Okay.
sure.
Okay. Good deal. All right. So I think that's, well, was there anything else that you wanted to say about perception?
Well, I'll talk all day about it, so I think we're good. We
Okay.
can do
All
another
right.
episode if you want.
Okay. All right. Well, I think this will be a good time to segue into owning your kingdom. So this is Man Up Monday. King is in the word kingdom. So we want to help the kings out there to own their kingdom. So that this is
Yes.
the title of your book. So tell us about the book.
So this book right here, I'll tell you something. When I wrote this book, um, it so many emotions came up for me, and I'll tell you why. Everything I said in this book, I did no research for this book. This is all what I did to help myself get out of the slump I was in. Where I told you I suffered from all that stuff, right? This book encompasses the action steps that I took myself. And there's exercises, it's a workbook, right? It's not just you read it and then throw it away. I don't know. This is actually a plan that you use to get to where you're trying to go. It's literally a workbook you download with a ton of exercises, right? Goal setting, planning your days, right? Making sure you're getting that self care in every day. All this stuff, right? There's a ton of stuff in here. Um, so owning your kingdom in a nutshell really is about controlling yourself, controlling your emotions, having control of your how you speak to yourself and others, having that compassion, having that empathy, emotional intelligence. A lot of us struggle with emotional intelligence, right? We cannot put ourselves in other people's shoes, right? We can barely put ourselves in our own shoes because we've heard so much negativity about trying to be, vulnerable and trying to express yourself, right? So you have this shell, you put on this facade, and you act like you're so hard, but really what that does is that make you frail
Mm,
because you cannot share how you're truly feeling, right? You can't express yourself. So you're
mm,
not owning anything at that point, right? Something else that was ingrained in you from the past is holding on to you, right? So until you break that, right, and you realize that really being your authentic self is the most powerful thing you can do, and you're not going to please everyone, right? And really, that's
mm,
not why you should be living, right? If you live someone else's life, you will never be happy, right?
mm,
So owning your kingdom is about being unapologetically you, and also making sure that you're unapologetically letting people know your boundaries, knowing what's going on with you, right? Being honest, being open, being transparent, especially with your loved ones, right?
mm,
If you continue to block those relationships off, then we've all seen it. We lose people that really were near and dear to us because we just could not let them fully in, and we
mm,
could not fully express ourselves to them. So this book really does all that. It really will get you past that, right? I use the word serendipity again in here, right? And someone who
mm,
read it, they said it was divine to them because they didn't know what serendipity meant. And then when they looked it up, they're like, man, really, that's what I want, right? I want to be able to open myself up to new experiences. Well, you can't do that if you don't own your kingdom, right?
mm.
You can't do that.
Okay. So own your kingdom is about new experiences and
Yeah,
controlling yourself, emotional intelligence.
yeah,
Wow, it sounds like a
yeah.
fantastic book.
Thank you. Yeah, and the first thing I start with, I'll tell you what the first chapter starts about. Is
Okay.
forgiving yourself, right?
Mm,
Forgiving yourself because we hold on and harbor so many things and we wish that things would change. But if anything in your life changed at least once, no matter how horrible it was, it would have changed who you were now. You're meant to be who you are today because it has given you insight and it is giving you tools that are meant to be used for something else. You got to figure out what that something else is, though. You got to figure
mm,
out what you how you want to leverage that. Like for me, my story, right? As painful as it is, right? Everything that's has occurred has given me the tools where I can help people genuinely, right? Because I've been through so many things myself, right? So I can genuinely
Mhm.
listen to people and say, hey, I have a plan for you, right? I think I can help you, right? And not just be doing it like for a money grab. You see so many coaches and stuff popping up, but I always ask them like, how did you become a coach, right? So
Mhm.
how did you,
Mhm.
what brought you here, right? So that's not me. Like all this stuff, you can read the book, right? That's what I had went through, and that's what I present to you.
All right. Very good. So,
Thank you.
as it relates to vulnerability and perception, what place does it have in owning your kingdom? Do you believe?
Oh, it's part of the foundation.
Mhm.
Those are foundational, right? There's a couple pillars like that falls, that perception and that vulnerability really falls in the self-love piece, because again, I said vulnerability is not just
Mm,
being vulnerable to other people, it's being vulnerable to yourself too, because vulnerable is
mhm,
really honesty too, right? It's really about
mm,
being honest with your feelings and honest of your expressions and your emotions, and that perception. Again, if you positively look at yourself, you will believe that you can do things. You think about all the greatest inventions, all the things we use, the computers we're on right now. Someone once said that that was impossible,
mm,
and then the person that created it said, no, I believe that I can do this, right? If that
mhm.
person didn't have that perception of themselves and they weren't willing to be vulnerable enough to go get the help for the person who made the semiconductor and all the other parts that's in it, it would have never existed, right? So those two go hand in hand, right? Those are foundational.
That was poetic. You put that together real well.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, I do love
Very
poetry too, so
good. Oh, look at you, man of
oh
many
yeah,
talents.
oh yeah, I love poetry.
All right, good deal. Well, you have a virtual event coming up, so tell the folks
I
about
do.
that.
So November 7th, between 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time, I have a book conference, virtual book conference, and you can go ahead and register. The link is in my bio. If you go anywhere, Instagram, Facebook, wherever, you'll see it. It's the first link in my bio, or you can DM me for more details. But what it is I have like 5 other speakers. I have a wonderful host that's going to host it for me, and we're doing networking events. We have breakout rooms where people can talk to each other, get to know one another, can speak to the speakers. We'll be there as well, interacting with you all. We have Q&A sessions. So if you have questions like you're doing here today, you can ask those questions and we'll go ahead and answer as many as we can. We have a panel discussion. It's just going to be a great thing. I read some of the book, some of the chapters of the book, and talk about why I even wrote it, things of that nature. So it's going to be a great event. It's my first book launch, so I'm really excited about it, and I hope to see some of y'all there.
Okay. Um, Talk to them about, is there a cost for this event?
So actually, there are free tickets, right? You got to get them while they last, and then there are VIP tickets that opens you up to the possibility of winning some of the raffle prizes. That's another thing. We have raffle prizes, and also you can win a free session with me.
Okay. Wow.
So go ahead and
So,
sign up. Right now.
right, right,
It's
right,
gonna be
right. So
love.
I just put in the chat at Live Not Load. So you're at Live Not
And what I'll do
on
actually is I
Instagram
can,
as well.
yeah, I can put I don't know where the chat is, but I'll put the link to the Eventbrite in the chat. That way you can just share it with them
Okay.
here.
Yeah, just
I
do it
think
in a
that'll
private
be
chat and I can copy and paste it in there. Or if you're in directly on Facebook or YouTube, you can put it in there.
okay. Yeah,
All right.
I'm gonna send it in this private chat right now.
Okay, cool. So
Yeah.
hopefully this has been beneficial. You all have gleaned something I have. I got some notes. Listen.
I hope so. I hope so. I'm really, really passionate about helping others. Really passionate about this topic. I
Yeah.
understand how damaging it is to not just like immediate life, but to the future,
Mhm.
right? People regrets are the things you don't want to have when you're coming to the end of life, right? They always
Mhm.
ask what people regret, and it's always something dealing with time. So
Mm.
the mindset and the perception really helps you take back that time and utilize it for what you really want to do in life, right?
Yes.
Because that's the one resource that we can't get back, right? You can't get
Mhm.
time back, so you want to make sure you're
No.
utilizing that wisely. And if you're spending
Yes.
it downing yourself, or living someone else's life, or believing that you have to live a life that you're just not fulfilled in, right? That's we have to change that.
Right. We have to change that. I call it deprogramming and reprogramming.
Yes, yes, I love that.
Mhm.
I love that.
Deprogramming and reprogramming.
Yes, indeed.
Yes. So, any other questions from my viewers? Okay, or comments? I see the chief said, I've been taking my notes. This has opened my eyes to some things I'm addressing in my own life. Well, good
I
deal,
love
chief.
it. I love
I'm
it,
so
King.
glad.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Terrell. I appreciate that. Appreciate you
Thank you for
tuning
sharing
in.
that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right. Okay, wait. Princess said, thank you, Nicole and Javon, for tonight. Very intelligent information. Thank you, Princess, for chiming in and
Thank
sharing
you.
too. We appreciate that. This is
Yes, for sure.
interactive, this is community, and we got to talk about these things, Very, very important.
100%. This
Yeah.
platform is very important, Nicole. So I'm glad you brought
Okay.
it back.
No, my pleasure. Anthony said, thank you both for your time. This was like hearing a
Mm.
voice I haven't heard in 5 years. True God moment. Oh, wow. Thank you, Anthony.
Wow. Wow. Thank you, Anthony.
You honor us with your
Wow.
words. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. And Javon, she said, thanks to you both. Thank you, Javon. Appreciate you
Thank you,
tuning in,
Javon.
sis. Yes. So this has been awesome.
Yes. Yes.
Y'all,
I'm excited.
go check out Javon on Instagram, on Facebook. Follow him. He gives out great nuggets on a daily, like quotes,
Thank
and
you.
sometimes he's walking and talking about different things. So, always
Yeah.
something positive and uplifting and just real. So,
Yeah.
Javon,
Thank
I
you. Thank
appreciate
you.
you. Appreciate your
Yeah.
time. Appreciate the book and all that you're doing to
Yeah.
live
I
and not love.
appreciate you as well. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you as well, Nicole, and everyone who's joined. I look forward to us doing it again sometime.
Okay, I would love that. And all the best with the virtual event. Y'all check them out November
Thank you.
7th. Mm-hmm.
Yes, check it out. Check it out. Please get your
Yep.
tickets now. It's going
Mm-hmm.
to be an event to remember.
I put the link in the chat so you can click on that and get your tickets. There are free tickets available. So
Yes, there are.
all right. So hopefully I'll see y'all Wednesday. Have a great evening. We'll see y'all later.
Peace.